Hello and welcome to Surveillance Report 9. We're trying out a new format this week, so yeah. This I am actually planning to stick to, so please let me know your feedback in the comments because this is very much new. So we have the video format right now, we also have the podcast. So make sure you join the podcast, which is now available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Obviously, there's an RSS link you can apply to any client you want to use. So the podcast is going to have more of my personal opinions on things because it's just audio based. So I'm just going to go ranting about things or just giving my thoughts or more insight. Hopefully just breaking down news articles, whereas this is more just covering the news inside the video. So you have the video and then you have the podcast. So join the podcast if you want that extra insight. But if you just want the quick videos, this is where you're going to find them. So let's go ahead and cover security and privacy news from the last week. First up, we're going to start with Google. So our first story comes from, Google, who has told the world how important they are because they claim they've blocked 126 million COVID-19 email phishing scams in the last week. This comes during a time where scams, especially phishing scams, are at a high as people attempt to take advantage of fear and panic during this pandemic. And phishing scams are some of the most effective as they rely on user error. So naturally, this is going to be a very effective time to start phishing scams. Google has also removed 49 extensions, and these were stealing cryptocurrency wallet keys. Many of them were disguised themselves as real cryptocurrency wallet apps like Ledger, MyEtherWallet, Trezor, and Electrum. But in reality, they were stealing private keys. Supposedly, all 49 came from the same person or group, and it seems to be aimed at higher targets, so it wasn't something sent out to the masses that affected millions of users. It seems to have been utilized mostly to target high-value accounts. The last Google news relates to Chrome, where Google has given a critical warning to its users to update because of a supposedly serious exploit. Google gave a very vague description. Quote, use after free in-speech recognizer. That is all. This has been marked as reserved by the US government's NVD, or National Vulnerability Database. Google, as almost always, has been very proactive with their cybersecurity this week, so that is always a positive to Google, despite their privacy invasions. Microsoft is their next company, and they open very similarly to Google, which is phishing scams. Except Microsoft's is, they're the ones being directly affected, or more so their users. There is an ongoing phishing campaign designed to collect and steal user credentials, and cool enough, it even bypasses two-factor authentication, as it'll exfiltrate the 2FA code in real time from the phishing site. Very well done and executed attack, so if you're a GitHub user, triple check the URL when you log in. The other Microsoft piece is just more so cool. Supposedly, Microsoft has developed a system that can distinguish security from non-security related bugs 99% of the time, and it identifies which of those are critical bugs, high priority issues, 97% of the time. They're planning on open sourcing this methodology on GitHub in the coming months, and that is always something welcome in my book, so it is good to recognize when companies do positive things like this. Our next news category this week was cars, and it's not about Tesla, although Tesla has its own share of problems. We'll talk about them soon. First, Ford and Volkswagen cars suffer from security flaws that put the owner's personal data and safety at risk. The list for the flaws is pretty lengthy. Supposedly, the infotainment unit could be hacked via a command that disabled the traction control system. From there, personal data, including phone contacts and location history, could be collected. By lifting the Volkswagen badge on the front of the car, the radar module can be accessed, which allows someone to tamper with the car's collision detection safety system. With Ford, the tire pressure monitoring system could be intercepted with a laptop and a $30 gadget from Amazon, which could allow them to change the value of the air pressure that the driver would see, posing a security risk. Or safety risk, my bad. And by hacking into the Ford Focus's controller area network, they were able to find Wi-Fi details and a password for the computer system of Ford's Detroit factory. They can also access detailed information about the user's driving habits and location history. Ford and Volkswagen both gave very mediocre responses to these concerns, which I recommend you read in the sources because it's not just something I could quote for you. There's several different things they said, but yeah, it's very pathetic, so you should go and read them. In a separate investigation, it's been shown that safety system sensors in some modern cars are collecting data about the road and submitting this to third-party companies. This investigation tackled Mobileye sensors specifically, which has mapped more than 180 million miles of roads worldwide. As soon as this year, Mobileye plans to use the sensors built into BMW cars to collect data about their immediate surroundings. Similar sensors are built into Ford, Nissan, and Volkswagen, which Mobileye says it'll harvest data from in the US by 2021, which is coming up fast. Note, Mobileye isn't the only company doing this, so it's a pretty common thing happening nowadays, apparently. Why should we be surprised? A company called Camera is doing this with Toyota, and like I said about Tesla, we all know Tesla does this to some extent. This investigation, you should read it because it's huge and it offers a ton of insight. Seriously, it's very well done. The article covers the whole story behind this, and it covers so much more context behind things, so I really recommend reading that story. It's a good one. That, my friends, wraps up the main company news, but we still have some other just casual articles, so let's go ahead and skip through those real quick. RigUp, a labor marketplace for employing workers in its oil, gas, and solar business, had a data leak which included 70,000 private files of employees and candidates, which included personal photos, their paperwork, and more. Clearview AI, that company harvesting every image uploaded to social media like ever, has made headlines again as its source code and app data were exposed in a security lapse. This included secret keys, cloud storage credentials, and copies of its apps. This doesn't seem to have been, honestly, a very big deal, but it just adds to the pile of things they've screwed up on. Dell has released a new tool that can detect BIOS attacks. It is offered free to its enterprise customers, and overall a pretty new concept that is not seen very often. This one grinds my gears. Twitter has been going through a lengthy legal battle to be able to reveal US government surveillance requests in a transparency report. This is good. Twitter actually wants to be proactive and reveal to the world how the US is collecting and using user data on its own platform. Well, a US judge has blocked this bid, making Twitter unable to reveal these requests because it's, quote, likely to harm national security. Now, this is what we hear. It's the main go-to argument. If you care about national security and you care about your children and you care about the well-being of American citizens, you need to be for surveillance and you need to pretty much hand over your rights and information. This is not true. We see this repeatedly. We see studies about this. We see news articles about this. We see data that shows us that mass data collection and surveillance is not that effective. If anything, it's ineffective. I highly recommend just going to YouTube and just looking up Snowden. He is very good at articulating the dangers of surveillance and how ineffective it is. And finally, Linksys is proactively locking people out of their Wi-Fi cloud accounts and forcing password resets after attacks that were performed on their routers. That was all the companies, and now time for research. This is a simple article. It was just a basic survey of 1,500 Americans that found 79% of Americans share their passwords with people outside their home, normally for video streaming. 39% use the same password for every service, and only 20% of Americans are worried about identity theft or hacking. There has been something dubbed to be an unkillable Android backdoor, which essentially was persistent to the point where a device factory reset didn't remove it. This had researchers stumped for months, and they now know how it's done. It is the result of rogue folders containing a Trojan installer, neither of which was removed by a device reset. The Trojan would reinstall the backdoor in the event of a reset. There's an entire write-up, study, and analysis of how this was done, and I'd highly recommend you read it, especially if you want the more technical explanation of how this all works, because it's very cool stuff. Pastebin, a service which is used for pasting text around the internet, commonly also used by hackers to post lists of stolen passwords, announcements of data breaches, and malware, has silently made it harder for security researchers to scrape their site for information on new posts. People are unable to search Pastebin or even scrape it using a special API that people paid for. This has been discontinued supposedly because of abuse, which is unfortunate, but there's also a major question of if this is actually a good move to make in the long run. What's guaranteed, though, is researchers are not happy. Researchers from Google Brain, Intel, OpenAI, and other top research labs in the US and Europe joined together to release a kit for organizations that will pay developers for finding bias in AI, similar to how bug bounties are offered in software. Up next, 725 Ruby libraries uploaded to the official RubyGems repo contained malware meant to hijack users' clipboards. These have all been removed, but the way they worked is they replaced the Bitcoin addresses copied to the clipboard with one controlled by the attacker to theoretically get someone to mistakenly send them money instead of themselves. or whoever they're trying to send money to. It doesn't seem this was very successful because I think they tried to look into the wallet and they didn't see any payments made to it. But this is a wonderful example of creativity, and for that, I give them an A for effort. Our last research piece is not really directly related to privacy, but I think it's a good shock piece that should make people think a bit. A clinical team used MIT's AI to remotely monitor a COVID-19 patient. That's it. Seems harmless, right? Well, no. It enabled the researchers to remotely monitor a patient's breathing, movement, sleep patterns, and more using only wireless signals. This has been deployed in over 200 hospitals, homes, and assistive care facilities. This article doesn't even talk about or mention the privacy implications of this. The fact that someone's breathing, their breathing, can be tracked remotely using wireless signals is just a great indicator that almost anything nowadays can be made into personally identifiable information and being fed to feed who you are as a person. It's almost fascinating how many different ways we can identify ourselves through data and different means of investigating who we are as people. It's wild, but also the privacy side of it is just a nightmare. So, yeah. It's time to get political. Almost all the news except one article this week are about coronavirus. So let's just cover all the coronavirus news. Tech companies are processing large volumes of confidential UK patient data in a data mining operation, part of the government's response to the coronavirus outbreak. We've already seen less extreme methods of this happening with companies on an individual basis, like Facebook, Google, or Apple, who shared all of their location tracking for coronavirus. But this seems to be on a much larger scale and is another example of invasive tracking being done for the cause of beating corona. If you're okay with the UK collecting this information, well, the UK is also developing, surprise, a tracing app to track people during the coronavirus pandemic. That's really it. It's just another app. Let's move on. Surprise number 2. Australia wants to, you guessed it, do contact tracing through a mobile app. This is the same app Singapore is using, which I believe is either open source or going to be open source, so at least it has that going for it. In other parts of the world, you have Switzerland, who has pulled out of the European contact tracing app project. For context, this seems to have been the best bet for a tracing app because the EU one was created for no other reason than to offer privacy benefits and to also be GDPR compliant. It's concerning that Switzerland, a country known to value privacy, backed out of even this initiative, which should give us some insight into how bad the other apps might be. Switzerland is now doing their own contact tracing app that better guarantees user privacy, at least according to them. So maybe this is our new best bet. Get dethroned, EU. Our final corona piece. Back to the UK, researchers have estimated that 80% of current smartphone owners would need to use the app for it to be effective. In other words, I'm going to translate this for you. They're pretty much useless. Why? Well, most of them rely on Bluetooth low energy systems, which not every phone supports. Some people don't have smartphones, and these are all opt-in programs, so it relies on almost the entire population of people who own compatible devices to opt in. The only scenario this seems to make sense is if everyone is forced to use the app, and those who can't use the app are given a device. Russia has been doing this, we covered that in last week's episode, but that seems to have the issue of obviously taking away user rights and freedoms. Our final political news, which is not about corona, is also from the UK. They got hit pretty hard this week. It's been revealed in secret details from staff online that the Ministry of Defense is forced to deal with 70 security leaks a week. It's pretty embarrassing and seems to possibly put troops at risk in a lot of cases. Not much more to say here, except, well, that sucks, and it sounds like something that needs to be fixed or changed for the better. And now onto our final category, the misfits. The Tor project. This is a sad misfit story. They have laid off a third of their staff, so 13 out of the 35 people. It's much smaller than I expected. This is all due to coronavirus and is a very unfortunate thing to happen. I encourage people watching to donate to the Tor project because what they do there is great. You can get really cool merchandise and stickers if you donate, which I am proud to say, I have some of those. Moving on, when I made that recent Zoom video, give that a watch if you haven't already, it dives into everything you need to know about Zoom, right? Or I thought. I didn't expect it to become outdated within a week, but it has been outdated within a week. as hackers are selling 2 critical Zoom zero-day exploits for $500,000. One is for Windows and the other for Mac OS. These don't seem to be super serious as they require people to be in a call they initiated to function, but it just adds more damage to the already ruined reputation that Zoom has any decent security. And our final article, which is also about Zoom, specifically the US House Oversight Committee was victim to Zoom bombing. It's unknown what the bombers did, but what is known is the House ignored all warnings that this will likely happen, including warning from the FBI, the media, even the Senate stopped using Zoom, and of course, Techlore. Oh my gosh, did they not even watch my channel? And that crappy joke is probably a good sign that this episode needs to end. I want to thank those of you who've watched this far. Seriously, you're amazing. This is such a long video. These videos are long. We have a lot of news to cover, and all of you watching this far, it means that you care, and more so than just supporting us, it's nice to see people actually care about this stuff enough to watch this far. So good on you. Spread the word. I also want to thank all of our patrons. I can't tell you how much your monthly contribution helps. It's been great, especially with AdSense like completely hitting our channel. With coronavirus, we lost like 50% of revenue from AdSense during these months that coronavirus has been a thing. So that monthly contribution, and also everyone who donates to Bad and Brave Rewards, it's just an immense help. So thanks to everybody who's been supportive of us, because seeing the donations not only shows me and helps me directly, but it shows me that people care and want to see more content. So thank you so much. That is all I have to say. Yeah, thank you for watching, everybody. Have a nice day. Enjoy your days at home, and yeah, do what you can. Have fun. Start something new. Be creative. Yeah, get out there. Or don't get out there.